In a forgotten valley, cradled by mist and the whispers of a winding river, stood an ancient oak, its gnarled branches stretching like the arms of a weathered sage toward the heavens. Its roots, thick as a man's thigh, burrowed deep into the earth, drinking from secrets buried in the soil of centuries. The villagers of Eldergrove called it the Elder Oak, a name spoken with reverence, for it was said to have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the fleeting dance of seasons, and the quiet dreams of countless souls. Its bark was etched with the scars of time, lightning strikes, lovers' carvings, and the gentle whir of rain and wind. Yet it stood unyielding, a silent sentinel whose presence was both a comfort and a mystery. To the children, it was a giant; to the elders, a teacher; to the wanderers, a beacon. Its leaves, broad and green in summer, golden and brittle in autumn, seemed to hum with a wisdom that could not be spoken, only felt. And so begins the tale of how the elder oak shared its wisdom with a world that had forgotten how to listen. Long ago, before the valley had a name, the oak was a sapling, born from an acorn carried by a raven fleeing a great storm. The raven, weary and battered, dropped the acorn into a patch of fertile earth where the river bent and the hills sighed. The acorn took root, and as the years turned to decades, the sapling grew into a mighty tree, its branches a haven for birds, its shade a refuge for travelers. The first people to settle in the valley, a tribe called the Luther, believed the oak was a gift from the earth itself, a bridge between the mortal world and the spirits that danced in the unseen. They would gather beneath its canopy to share stories, settle disputes, and seek guidance. The Luther had no kings, no written laws; they needed only the oak, whose silence seemed to carry the weight of truth. When a hunter quarreled with his brother over a stolen kill, they sat beneath the tree, and by dusk, their anger had dissolved, not through words but through the quiet that the oak imposed. When a mother wept for her child, lost to fever, she would press her cheek to its bark, and though the child did not return, her heart found a strange peace, as if the tree had absorbed her grief. As generations passed, the Luther faded, their songs carried away by the wind, their fires cold. New people came, farmers, builders, dreamers, who named the valley Eldergrove and built homes of stone and timber. They, too, felt the oak's presence, though they did not worship it as the Luther had. Instead, they told stories of its wisdom, stories that grew wilder with each telling. It was said that a single leaf from the elder oak could heal a broken heart, that its acorns, when planted with intent, could grant visions of the future. A blacksmith swore that when he forged his finest sword, he did so under the oak's shade, and the blade never dulled. A poet claimed her verses flowed only when she sat against its roots, as if the tree whispered rhymes through the earth. Yet the oak never spoke, not in the way humans do. Its language was patience, its lessons carved in the slow growth of its rings, the steady fall of its leaves. One spring, a young woman named Alara came to Eldergrove. She was a wanderer, her cloak patched from years of travel, her eyes bright with curiosity but shadowed by a sorrow she did not name. Alara had heard of the elder oak from a merchant in a distant city, who spoke of a tree that could answer any question if one knew how to ask. She carried a question so heavy it bent her shoulders, though she kept it locked within her heart. When she reached the valley, the villagers welcomed her with bread and ale, but they warned her, "The oak does not speak to those who demand. You must wait, and you must listen." Alara nodded, though she did not understand, and made her way to the tree. It stood alone in a clearing, its branches so vast they seemed to hold up the sky. Alara sat at its base, her back against the rough bark, and whispered her question, "Why must I lose all that I love?" She waited, expecting a voice, a sign, perhaps a leaf to fall as the stories promised. But the oak was silent. The wind stirred its leaves, the river murmured nearby, and the sun climbed higher, but no answer came. Alara stayed through the day, her frustration growing. She had traveled leagues, crossed mountains and rivers, for this? A mute tree? By nightfall, she was angry, her question burning hotter than ever. She stood, ready to leave, when a single acorn fell at her feet. She picked it up, small and smooth, and though she felt no magic in it, she tucked it into her pocket, unwilling to discard even this small token. Alara did not leave Eldergrove. Something about the valley, the way the light slanted through the hills, the way the river sang, held her. She built a small hut near the oak, intending to stay only until she had her answer. Days became weeks, weeks became months. She returned to the oak daily, sometimes speaking her question, sometimes sitting in silence. She watched the seasons shift, the leaves greening, then blazing red and gold, then falling to blanket the earth. She saw squirrels bury acorns, birds nest in the branches, and children climb the lower boughs, their laughter echoing. The oak did not speak, but Alara began to notice its rhythms, the way it leaned into storms without breaking, the way it shed its leaves without clinging, the way it stood firm through drought and flood. She began to see her question differently, not as a demand but as a wound, one the oak could not heal but could help her carry. Years passed. Alara's hair grayed, her hands grew calloused from tending a garden near her hut. She became part of Eldergrove, known for her quiet kindness, her skill with herbs, her stories of distant lands. Children would come to her, asking about the oak, and she would tell them, "It does not give answers. It teaches you to live with your questions." She never spoke of her own question, though it still lived in her heart, softer now, less like a blade and more like a seed. One autumn, as she sat beneath the oak, now old and frail, she felt a warmth in her pocket. The acorn, forgotten all these years, was still there. She took it out, rolling it between her fingers, and smiled. She dug a small hole at the oak's base and planted it, not expecting visions or miracles, but because it felt right. Alara died that winter, her body laid to rest near the oak, as she had wished. The villagers mourned her, but they noticed something strange in the spring. A sapling had sprouted where she had planted the acorn. It grew quickly, its leaves mirroring those of the elder oak, and soon it was as if the two trees were one, their roots entwined, their branches touching. The villagers began to call the new tree Alara's oak, and they said it shared the same wisdom as its parent, though it was younger, its bark smoother, its presence gentler. The elder oak stood as it always had, but now it had a companion, a testament to the woman who had listened, not for a day or a year, but for a lifetime. Centuries later, Eldergrove had grown into a bustling town, its fields crisscrossed with roads, its skies smudged with smoke from forges and mills. The elder oak and Alara's oak still stood, though the clearing was smaller now, hemmed in by houses and barns. The townsfolk, busy with trade and ambition, rarely visited the trees, and the old stories were fading, replaced by tales of wealth and progress. A merchant named Torin, wealthy but restless, came to the oaks one evening, driven by a question he could not voice even to himself. He had gained much, gold, land, influence, but felt empty, as if his life were a house with no foundation. He had heard of the oak's wisdom, though he scoffed at the idea of trees holding answers. Still, he sat beneath them, staring at their tangled branches, and muttered, "What am I missing?" Like Alara, Torin waited, but unlike her, he had no patience. He returned day after day, growing angrier with each visit. "Speak, damn you," he shouted one evening, kicking the elder oak's roots. The trees did not answer, but a storm came that night, fierce and unyielding. Lightning struck the elder oak, splitting a branch that crashed to the ground, narrowly missing Torin's home. The townsfolk saw it as a sign, a warning, but Torin saw only loss, a branch he could have sold for timber. He ordered the oaks cut down, claiming they were a danger, their roots a nuisance to his plans for a new market. The townsfolk protested, but Torin's wealth spoke louder than their voices. Men with axes came at dawn, their blades glinting in the early light. As the first axe bit into the elder oak's bark, a strange thing happened. The ground trembled, not violently, but enough to make the men pause. The river, usually gentle, swelled and roared, flooding the clearing. The men fled, their axes abandoned, and Torin, watching from a distance, felt a chill he could not explain. That night, he dreamed of the oaks, not as trees, but as figures, one ancient and stern, the other younger, with eyes like Alaris. They did not speak, but their gaze pierced him, and he woke sweating, his question, "What am I missing?" Echoing in his mind, Torin did not try to cut the oaks again. Instead, he left Eldergrove, selling his lands and vanishing into the world beyond the valley. The oaks remained, and the townsfolk, shaken by the storm and the flood, began to visit them again. They brought their questions, their fears, their hopes, and though the oaks never spoke, the act of sitting beneath them, of listening to the wind and the leaves, brought a clarity that words could not. The oaks became a place of pilgrimage, not for answers, but for the courage to live with questions, to endure loss, to grow through time. And so the elder oak and the Lara's oak stood, their roots deeper than memory, their branches a canopy for the lost and the seeking. They did not promise healing or visions, but they offered something greater, the wisdom of endurance, of bending without breaking, of growing through storm and drought. The valley changed, villages became towns, towns became cities, but the oaks remained, silent teachers in a world that often forgot how to listen. Their leaves fell and grew again, their acorns scattered by wind and wing, and in each seed was the promise of another tree, another story, another chance to learn what it means to stand, to wait, to be. The tale of the elder oak spread beyond Eldergrove, carried by travelers who had sat beneath its branches and felt something shift within them. Scholars wrote of it in books, poets wove it into verses, and children whispered its name in games. Yet the oak itself asked for nothing, not reverence, not worship, not even understanding. It simply was, rooted, vast, eternal. And in its silence, it taught the greatest lesson of all, that wisdom is not found in answers, but in the courage to keep asking, to keep growing, to keep standing through the endless turn of seasons. Do you still like today's story? If you like, please remember to subscribe to this channel and click the like icon. You can receive notifications and hear the latest stories as soon as possible. Good night, my baby.